It's okay. Oh, it's different. Oh boy. Yeah, humidity definitely makes it much worse. Hmm. Yeah, 5 minutes. We still don't have Dennis, but I forwarded you guys his message. He got into some troubles. So, are you guys, do you guys know each other for a long time? Hello? Hello? Oh, I'm muted. Okay. Hello? Hello? Oh, my microphone is not set up. mess up with my USB, the main USB devices, I guess. So you guys know each other for how long? Oh, wow. Oh yeah, the same, the same. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, I can tell you. There is a laser cutter, blue one, 3D printer on the right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We are in a good life.
Um, so the laser though is it's that's a 30 or 40 watt laser in it. So I've decided to strip all the electronics out of it and the laser tube and rebuild the chassis with a proper with proper mechanics for the X, Y, and Z.
Wow.
So that 3D printer, except for the panels, um, that's ATPE panels. Except for those, I built that from scratch. And there's a few parts on it that I got from a guy that machined them, so I didn't have to machine them. But yeah, I know a little bit about that stuff too.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Yes.
I've got
It was a little bit of a review of Ken's
Yeah, I've got two
Thank
CNC
lot.
machines.
And thank you for joining us today. I think today is going to be a pretty interesting episode. We have Ken Rice with us, the long term with open source projects like OpenSIPs, FreeSWITCH, etc. So Giovanni, tell us a little bit more about Ken
Yeah,
because you know him
cool.
better.
Ken is a mainstay of open source Telegram, and a long time, not tell how much, a year. But so into tech, he has, apart from source and but has also high code, high traffic, and services like presidential campaign and all kind of things. Really some load on your machine, operation, bring out all the problems that you don't have when you are not operating. So it's and real world experience, not buzzword marketing. And also, he's not involved kind of company, so he has no burden of tentative, and is just one of the people that build use and push forward open source and rise.
Hey guys, how y'all doing today? So I do have ulterior motives for using things like OpenSIP and FreeSWITCH because I do work for a company that uses that in the software as a service, platform as a service arena. However, I've been around the community for a long time. For many years, I was a core member of the FreeSWITCH team, where I did things like packaging and all the releases, and bug fixes, all kinds of fun stuff related to running an open source project. Where I worked with Mike, Brian, and Tony, for many years on that. And I've known those guys for over a day, all the way back to when Tony was contributing to Asterisk on a regular before Free. So I've seen a lot of things come and go over the years. I've seen a lot of things change. There's been a lot of people come and go from the community where they came into the community, uh, you know, they had an itch that needed to get scratched, and so they joined the community, and in some cases they ended up being fairly high profile members of the community, like KP Fleming, for instance, of Asterisk fame. KP came along and then contributed a lot. Ended up going to work at Digium and leading the Asterisk project for quite a while after Mark stepped away. And then he got another job at another company that pulled him away from Asterisk a fair bit. So you see these kind of things, excuse me, happen in the community, but because it's open source, things keep going. You see, Mark Spencer originally wrote Asterisk, and and he is on to other things now. I think he's doing avionics, open source avionics now. And he, passed the helm over to KP Fleming, and then KP's on to other things. And now you've got Matt running things over. And, it just goes to show that open source is stronger than just one person. Um, so, Giovanni. I've seen some of the stuff that you've done for GSM and what was that module that's kind of dead now that you did way back in the day, Mod Skype?
Yeah. Skype things. But
So,
for example, I saw that you also wrote extensions for PBX back in the day, probably the first one or something like
I've done extensions for Fusion PBX. We actually worked with Mark Crane over there to do Fusion PBX. Excuse me, guys. Did not start out as a PBX. It started out as a content management system, and that's what Mark was doing at that point in time. And then Mark had the need for a PBX, and so he used his original CMS code as the base for that. The way as I understand it. Now I may be off there, but that's how I remember it. Anyway, so some of the stuff was as with new coders. Mark did some things that he didn't realize the consequences of later on down the road. And so I worked with Mark and several other people on helping him redesign some of the code patterns and principles that he was using inside the code, and implemented several modules. In fact, I think I implemented one of the first video soft phones in Fusion PBX. That's been dropped long by the wayside now. That was pre. That was pre, Verto and PJ, not PJ, but SIP.js, those kind of things. Flash phoner, that's what it was called.
it was Flash. Yeah.
It was Flash.
RTMP.
Yeah, and it required, I think, Red 5 on the back end.
Yeah.
So, but it worked, and it worked in the browser. So we did that. We did a few other things on there, but we've seen the world change quite drastically. In the past, even in the past 5 or 6 years,
Five
in
years.
in relation to things. I mean, 5-6 years ago, we were looking at everybody's still doing hard phones real heavily. Everybody's still, using things like PJ SIP or other SIP stacks like that, to build soft phones. And of course, you have, the industry, kind of the kind of industry standard type guys like Bria over at Counterpath and Xlite, and those guys have been around forever. But now those kinds of applications are still around because they work, they're stable. With somebody like Counterpath, they've been around forever and they support their product really, really well. And even though they are commercial, they have a lot of really cool people out there that have been involved in the community. So they understand that it's in their interest to support the open source community, because without the open source community, they're missing a huge part of their customers. So they get that. But now you see that kind of transitioning away from that and into all WebRTC stuff on the client, and then heavy utilization of SIP, primarily SIP on the back end. Even if you look at something like your good old-fashioned iPhone, there's so much WebRTC and SIP in this device, it's not even funny. If you're running GSM or LTE for phone calls, that's modified SIP. If you're using Google Hangouts like we're using here, or you're using the Facebook Messenger application with their video chat, Skype, all that stuff uses WebRTC now. They've distilled it down to WebRTC and stuck it in the phone, and the only question is, what are they using for signaling on top of the SDP? It's still stuff that we're all using, and I know, Giovanni, you use stuff. Maximum, I'm sure you use this stuff too.
Oh, we definitely do.
So the changes, as much as things have changed, though, they've really stayed the same, especially for us guys in the telephony market. Here in the States, we have a mess of a telecom system. You can't. It requires just a tremendous amount of data just to be able to route a call from point A to point B. I don't think Giovanni, you have that much to deal with in Italy. Max, Max is in Canada. You do a lot of stuff in the U.S. market, Max.
Yeah, we're pretty much everywhere. We're trying not to be like too specific for a region.
Right.
Like historically, we had quite a lot of customers in Turkey, but that's long been passed. So these days is pretty much, I guess, distributed. We have few like clusters, I would say, of customers in several locations, but other than that, it's pretty much all around.
Right. It's a lot on the stuff staying the same. What I was getting at is, here in the States, if you want to route a phone call, you pretty much got to know where it's going to. And the only way to know where it's going to is you need to alert the call. And then you need to LRN the call. But you got to LRN the call before you alert the call because that's going to change which carrier it's going to.
Yeah,
Maybe.
this thing of LRN is completely different. I mean, probably it's only US. All the world.
As far as I know, it's only in the U.S. There, I've heard in the UK. Well, they're dealing with British Telecom there. That's the 11,000-pound gorilla, in their market. And so BT doesn't really want to do anything, but you're starting to see a groundswell of some smaller competitive carriers in the UK, and the competitive carriers still have to bounce. If you go from BT to one of the competitive carriers and your phone number is a native BT phone number, the call still goes to BT, and then BT reroutes it over to your competitive carrier. So it requires two trunks to route that call. But a lot of the competitive carriers are getting together and they're trading number lists, and they're
Yes,
trying to
yes.
build a central database to say, why are we sending this call to BT? Because BT is going to charge us for the trunking we can use. Let's just send the calls directly to each other and sort it that way. Now, the last I heard, they're still early on and they're still trying to figure out exactly how they're going to do it, but nobody has really done LRN. Can be quite expensive. It doesn't sound like much, but most people pay per lookup or per phone call for it, and those lookups can be. They're not. It's a microtransaction. Yes, it's only on average. I want to say it's in U.S. dollars. It's 0.0003. So so it's a very small fraction of a penny. But when you do a million phone calls, that adds up really quick.
Yeah. I believe few times we had to deal with that issue. For our customers, we had to implement some kind of cache to avoid making those calls too often, I would say.
Right. Well, I mean, you pretty much got to look it up every day, especially for wireless numbers. Wireline numbers, not so much. But in the U.S., I think the stats now are for cell phone users, like half of their numbers are ported, and and it's so you got to look it up to figure out who they're on, and then they change unless it's recently. If it's recently changed, you got to check it on a regular basis if they didn't change their mind for about 30 days, and then after that period, you can kind of slow it down. But once you hit that year mark or getting close to that year mark, you really got to start checking it often because they're American consumers are very finicky. I don't like AT&T anymore. I'm going to go to Verizon. Or Verizon made me mad, so I'm going to go to T-Mobile. Oh, T-Mobile made me mad. I'm going to go back to AT&T. And because that's really your only choices. So they kind of move around. But you got that, and then in the U.S. telecom market, everything is a charge. You want the caller ID name? That's a lookup. That's it. That's I think those are down to about half a penny to look up, but they're still they're still expensive. If you look at I don't want to name any companies, but real common. Go get DIDs in the U.S. and have them delivered to you SIP. If you want the caller ID lookup add on to it, they charge like a penny or two per call. And and if you get a million phone calls in, that's a lot of
Yeah.
pennies.
That adds up very fast.
Yeah, but that information is never free. It's not like LRN. At least with LRN, you can, if you're the right type of carrier, you can subscribe to the national database, and you get they'll basically give you dumps of it every so often. But that's a subscription, and it's quite expensive. It's if I remember correctly, it's somewhere in the good 5 figures a year U.S. So and it's over $10,000 a year. So I mean it's quite quite expensive. I want to say it was around 40 or 50,000, something like that. I don't remember. But there's a lot of money that changes hands over that data, and they do that to keep the smaller guys.
But in the big picture, how was your take, or can you recount us, tell the story of how market shifted toward communication platform as a service? I mean, how? And we were with via Cisco, FreeSWITch, Asterisk, and that's it. Then after a while, come up William. Then, I mean, because for example, in Europe or in Asia, dynamics are totally different. I'm very much interested in what's you saw it since the
Well, so I've got a couple of different perspectives on this. So, we started seeing that shift. You saw Twilio, and you saw some shifting there. However, I think, and this is no offense against Twilio or anything, I think their prices are a little bit high, and a lot of people saw that, and so that kind of prevented them from doing that. Then you have other entries into that market segment like Clevo. Now you have SignalWire coming in, and SignalWire is killing everybody on price um, alone. And I'm not affiliated with SignalWire. I do disclaimer. I do know everybody that owns pretty much owns SignalWire. Um, so, but I do not work there, and I do not work with those guys on that project. But they've come in and they've disrupted the market with pricing and feature set and some cool tools. So if you're already doing that sort of thing, you can migrate your projects over to them.
yeah. But my question is, why
But,
someone want to
but
use?
well, I think there's a couple of reasons for that, right? And uh, reason number one is in the U.S. we've seen a trend over the past decade or so of outsource everything. And so what they look at it and they see this cost involved. If you go out and you purchase, say, like Cisco Call Manager, you're not renting that; you're purchasing that piece of equipment. That's a depreciating asset. And it's been probably 20 years since I purchased a PBX. But the last PBX I purchased was in 1998. It was about 500 extensions, and this is old school Nortel option 81C for you guys. That's their big PBX right below going to a full blown end office. Um, and that purchase, if I recall correctly, was in 1998 dollars was around $300,000. And that was just for the equipment. And then there was about another $100,000 worth of install fees and that sort of stuff. And I think by the time it was all said and done, we probably spent about $500,000. Now that's $1998 with inflation and everything. If you translate that to current, $2020, you're probably looking at about 1.2, $1.3 million because the dollar value, the costs are up. I think the number that I saw the other day was like 2.2 times, something like that. So you multiply that. So you're looking at, $1 million purchase. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're a medium-sized company that's got 3 offices, it's got, a few hundred people in each office, you're looking at, 3 million people. You're looking at $3 million now to put PBXs that traditional way in there. And so they see that as a way to get rid of that cost and push that maintenance, because it's not just that cost. Now you've got a body that you've got to employ. And let's say that guy makes I'm just going to make up a number. Let's say that on the low end, let's say that guy makes $60,000 a year. Well, guy might make $60,000 a year, but it's costing the company another $30,000 to keep him around. So you're talking $90,000 to $100,000 a year for a body just to maintain those that equipment. So over 10-year lifespan, it's not just $3 million that you paid for the stuff. It's now $4 million. Oh, and by the way, we're Cisco and we're Nortel. So it's not just $1 million price tag that you paid for it up front. We want you to get a maintenance agreement, and that's going to be 20% of your purchase price per annum, for the rest of the thing. So now, 5 years later, you just spent another $3 million on this initial $3 million purchase. So where are we at? $10 million? Something like that, $9-10 million. So they see this as a way to get rid of that. Now, also in the U.S. at the same time, and this is kind of not non-technical reason, right? It's more financial reason has driven some of this stuff. In the U.S., we have this. Have you ever heard of the term EBITDA? EBITDA. Yeah, it is. It's an accounting phrase, right? So in the U.S., and I don't know if they're doing this.
Earning before interest and all that.
Yeah, depreciation, blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
So under the EBITDA model, anything that you can get rid of, that you can get off of your books, that's not going to depreciate, any kind of stuff that you can basically lease, makes the company look better. And so with that, they shift
but
that.
For example, just for clarification, why? I mean, you have a company, let's say, medium company that maybe will be stock market tomorrow or things like that, and so you take care about the and you want to look good, so you want to cut costs, and I understand, but then you can have, let's say, two choices. From one side, you can have cloud PBX. So someone is given to a complete PBX in the, let's say, like 2600 or like and many others. And from another side, you have companies like Twilio, Wire, Please, that gives API and you build your service. Seems to me, I mean, I don't get why people go API way, not to have ready-made.
Oh well. Oh, okay. So yeah, that's a little bit different market space there, right? So you have with the ready-made PBX. That's kind of almost outside of some basic IVR tools. That's kind of a one-size-fits-all type approach, right? Here's your tool to build your IVR. So you do a basic phone tree. Maybe they've got voice recognition on the phone, but in most of the cases they do not. It's you can build phone trees. Press 1 for sales, 2 for support, 3 to complain to somebody, 4 to hear whatever. Um, so and that's your basic hosted PBX type stuff, right? Now, if you're in a company, say, and let's just say Amazon, just to use them for an example, right? Amazon wants you to be able to check order status now. So with your traditional either in-house PBX or even the hosted PBX version of that, Amazon doesn't have a good way to tie their phone system into their order platform. They have to build some middleware, right? So if they go out and they use something like Twilio, they can send the call over to Twilio and via or SignalWire or Plevo or insert any of these API companies. And so the call gets there, and Plevo asks their web service, or SignalWire says, "Hey, web service, I got this call. What do you want me to do with it?" And the web service at Amazon says, "Play the sound file and collect digits, and or collect the audio and then send me the audio that they say." And then they process it. And they say, "Okay, so hey, you want order status? What is your order number? Right? Please say or enter your order number. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Oh, order number 1 2 3 4 5 6. We can look this up now. In a disconnected system from the phone system, and now get order status, and then we can TTS it. Play sound files. Get Allison Smith to record us a bunch of random words, and we can put it together. That kind of thing.
So
And
it's actually something like a market for companies that has their own internal.
right. So, and you see that in most big companies do have their own internal developers. If you look at uh, let's just look at somebody like Federal Express, FedEx, right?
Yeah.
The freight and air freight company. Um, they have multiple dev teams in house. They outsource a lot of stuff, but for like day to day reporting, that kind of stuff, they have devs in house. Even if you go back and you look at more traditional type of enterprises, uh, say a pharmaceutical company. I used to work for a vitamin company back many, many, many years ago, and we actually had 4 COBOL developers in house because we had AS400s. And if you wanted a report done, you had to send it to a developer. There was no, tools to just, build a report right there that was custom report. And it was either bring developers in house or call a support company and pay them, $5,000 to write a report that it would take your developer in house an hour to write. And so, you saw that kind of things, and because of that, these guys already have developer resources in house, and maybe they're not COBOL developers anymore because those are a dying breed. But now they're Java developers, they're PHP developers, they're Ruby, Python, J, Node, JavaScript, Node.js, all these different tools where they can easily talk web and respond to web requests. So I think that's made it easier for some of these companies to come in and instead of deploying the entire infrastructure themselves, eliminate at least part of that cost and send that back over to somebody like SignalWire. The SignalWire is deploying all the servers and all the other stuff to be able to do that, and they're aggregating all that cost and then dividing it up based on a phone call and making it far cheaper. Um, I mean, just consider, you know, Amazon is going to take the number of calls they're going to take. So for them to deploy a service like that, how many servers is it? Let's just say they were to build it with FreeSWITCH or Asterisk. How many servers are they going to have to deploy to handle Amazon, inbound call volume?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And that alone says, and then when you get into that call volume, it's not just deploying a FreeSWITCH box or 10 or an Asterisk box or 10 or 100 or 200. It's now you've got, at that scale, you've got 100, media servers that you've got to deal with. Okay, 100 media servers. Now we're not just dealing with 100 media servers. We're putting OpenSIP, ILEO in front of them. So now we've got load balancing. We've got, state tracking. We've got reporting. We've got all kinds of other fun stuff that we've got to deal with there. And oh, by the way, that just means now we're running, you know, gigs of RTP traffic across the network. That means our standard Cisco switches and routers are not going to work. we got to go to another tier of Cisco or Juniper or somebody like that, because what most people don't get is, sure, you can put 1,000 calls in a 100 megabit Ethernet connection, right? But you're doing that with RTP and with G711 at 20 millisecond packetization. You're now putting 200 packets per second per call on the line, and now you're overloading. Maybe not your switch, but you're starting to overload your routing at it once you hit that 100 or 1,000 call mark. You know.
Yeah.
And so you really start breaking other things. And so there's this whole cascade effect to scale that service. And then and we haven't even gotten into talking about things like CDRs or SIP tracing, so you can come back and troubleshoot later. And God forbid you want to capture the debug logs on 100 FreeSWITCH boxes and keep them around for a month so you can go back and look to see what happened using something like Graylog, because um, you're looking at somewhere probably around a petabyte of storage, and and yeah, storage is getting cheaper, but a petabyte of searchable storage is a lot of hard drives, a lot of power, a lot of server space, and so all these costs add up really quick. And for someone to be able to leverage things like a cloud-based service for that has that built into their business model, can help them save a lot of money, or it can help them maybe not save a lot of money. Maybe it's a wash at that point, but it also allows them to compress that time to market. And I think that's a big deal these days, especially in the North American market. I'm not sure about the European market, but Americans want everything and they want it right now. Amazon, I saw it on Amazon today and they delivered it this afternoon. So why can't I have this? Why can't I have this new feature in my PBX today? And I think that so you have all these things kind of conspiring against the traditional model. But at the same point in time, I think we're going to reach a saturation point where that pendulum's going to swing the other direction. We've seen that pendulum. I'm going to say the hosted, outsourced. Or let me call it the outsourced versus insourced. Compute resources, R&D development. All those different things that they do around the computer. We've seen that pendulum swing back and forth repeatedly over the past 4 decades, where computing has really been, a thing in business. Back in the early 80s, everybody bought their own computer, mid-range mainframe computers, especially in banks. And then you saw that pendulum swing where smaller banks would go to bigger banks and say, hey, you buy the computer, we'll rent time on it from you. The original cloud computing. And so you saw them do that with things like IBM Big Iron S390s, AS400s, that sort of stuff. And then in the early to mid 90s, we saw them start moving away from that, and start moving into desktop-based computing with 386 and 486 PCs everywhere, and things like Novell NetWare. So you saw that come back in-house at that point. And now we're seeing, here we are. We started, about 15 years ago with the internet and exploding, people pushing stuff back out to the data center. Then they brought it back in-house. Now we're pushing it all back out to AWS or, insert cloud hosting here. And, so it's just one of those things. It's the more they change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah. Well, I think what is kind of happening is computing kind of got first into like big things, and then it got a little bit smaller things, and now it kind of percolates into like everywhere pretty much.
Well, I
Because
mean,
if you look like around you, you probably have in this room I have probably 200 little computers easily.
oh, God.
Just looking by Like each monitor has at least one microcontroller, right? And each computer has 5 of them, so it's probably 1,000 right now.
Yeah.
My car has probably, I don't know, 200.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you get them down to this size, and this is actually a dev board. This
Yeah, I got one
right
before.
right? I mean, that's a whole computer right there. And most people don't realize that. It's a microcontroller, yes, but I mean, it's a powerful one. And you can program it in C or JavaScript or
Yeah,
whatever now, and they compile it and load code onto it. I mean, I've got probably, I don't know, I'll probably have a dozen of these things laying around. We're not even talking Raspberry Pi class here. This is like, what are these little ESP32s? They're what?
yeah, it looks like a SPC.
Yeah, that's what this is, the ESP. So these are what, $20 US or something like that? And
Yeah,
that's with the dev board. You can buy the actual microcontroller if you're embedding it into another product. Buy them even cheaper than that when you buy them by the reel. And I mean, they're just cheap. And you look at the cost on this thing. I mean, half the cost is the chip. The other half the cost is that little USB connector. And I mean, but these things are so cheap. I mean, most people don't even realize it. And this was actually a rant that I did at one of the first ClueCons. Is why is this a phone? This is a computer.
yeah,
You know, it's not. It's not a phone, although it does telephony like functionality. But just
yeah.
because just because when you open it up and we start showing you things like, oh come on, get to it. No, wrong button. But when you open it up and you get that nice little lock screen and everything, this isn't a lock screen, but it's close enough. I mean, we show you a keypad like on a telephone, and although it's not really a telephone, it's a glorified computer. I mean, how many of you guys have Apple Watches or Android watches? I mean, I've got an Apple Watch because I can't hear the phone and it vibrates and alerts me when I get messages and stuff. And I mean, everybody, a huge number of people have those today. They've sold millions and millions of them, and most people don't realize that not that the amount of computing power they have on their wrist is in a modern, watch like a Apple Watch or something is probably more computing power than the freaking American space shuttle had when it first launched back in the 70s.
But for example, just to go at the total opposite, uh, I will ask also if I can imagine how you see Kubernetes, all those kind of uh, our industry, trying to bring telecom in Kubernetes.
I've avoided them all.
Yeah, the
um,
same.
so well, I see things like Chef or Kubernetes or Docker um, as in some ways they're a necessary evil because of the way they go. I'm no fan of Docker. That's not a big secret, for anybody that knows me. I have a serious dislike for Docker. I have. I am kind of torn on things like Node.js. I think Node.js is probably okay for prototyping or quick and dirty stuff, but large scale stuff, I just don't understand why people use Node.js. And I think if you look at the way computing is going, especially in the server class machines, we're not making faster cores. We seem to top out in the 4 to 6 gigahertz range, and I think there's a lot of physics that come into play there. I'm no chip design expert, but that's what I read.
Definitely. There's more CPU, more cores.
Yeah, but they keep adding more cores onto the die. Um, so I mean, you can buy a Ryzen, reasonably cost, AMD Ryzen CPU these days with like 24 cores on it or something silly like that. And we're not talking hyper threading either. We're talking real 24 real
Yeah.
cores or wherever they top out now. Maybe it's 16. And then you add hyper threading to that. Now you've got 32 virtual cores or whatever that number works out to be. And you start trying to run multi-threaded app, single-threaded apps on this, like Node.js. Um, all JavaScript engines are single-threaded. You can buy the biggest, baddest, 128 core server with 11 terabytes of RAM on it and 38 gazillion petabytes of storage space on it, but it doesn't matter. You put Node.js on it, and it's only going to use one, no matter, unless you're running 38 a copy per core of Node.js. Which are you really going to do that? Nah, because now you've got other issues trying to run multiple copies of the JS engine on the same instance. So you end up having to use something like Kubernetes and Docker or Chef or this or that or the other to drive your virtualization. And adds another layer of complexity into there that you just didn't need. So, and people go, well, oh, it's just so much easier to write it in JavaScript. Well, from one, yes, it is easier to write that code in JavaScript because you're not dealing with some of these other things. But all you're doing is removing that complexity from that layer and you're shoving it over on your network engineer, your virtualization engineer, your system admin team that's got to maintain all this stuff now. And then you see nightmares where no company names mentioned, but I saw a company due to that was a telecom company that went hard down for over 12 hours not that long ago due to a Docker failure. And I mean, the company's got a lot of smart people, and I don't want to fault the company for a problem that was in Docker itself, right? But I mean, they ended up with when you have a Docker swarm, one of the machines is the controller, or whatever they call it, and then you got machines that fall under that. And if your main machine dies, and it promotes another one to the primary role, and you've got all these other secondaries. Well, they hit a bug in Docker. The way that I understand it is it was some state caused the primary to hard fail. Then, okay, no problem. Their disaster recovery kicks in, promotes the secondary to primary, and it takes over. Well, the only problem is now the same bug that was in the primary affects the secondary, and they cascade failed all their nodes in their Docker swarm. And when that happened, they literally had to reboot everything on the hardware level, and then rebuild all their Docker nodes from the ground up. Of course, while they're doing this, but so they avoid that bug, they figured out what it was. Now they've got to redeploy Docker to upgrade Docker, which means they got to upgrade all this other stuff and make sure everything's rebuilt for the new version of Docker, and wash, rinse, repeat, or we're going to have another cascade failure and go back offline. So you see these kind of issues, and it just makes me wonder why people want to subject themselves to that. I can understand it in
But
some
what is my understanding, for example, for the use of Docker is that they isolate your application from the run a fake operating system with a minimum set for your application.
right.
And
Well,
this
you're
is
okay.
for Docker. And for Kubernetes, it's because you must manage a very, very big number of servers, particularly web servers. And so it will be difficult to manage them other way. What I not so much understand,
I don't necessarily agree with that thing. I think you
because
add
because I don't see this in telecom. I can see that for Netflix or for Amazon. I don't see that for telecom.
I don't, somebody like Amazon or Netflix, I think they see these tools like Kubernetes. You've got a lot of their people coming out of the Windows world, right? And in Windows, you have to have tools like that. Microsoft, what was the old one? Microsoft Systems Management Server, which they had to rename because it was SMS was the name, and they didn't want to confuse it with text messaging, so they named it something else now. And you had to have tools like that because with Windows, when you install software on Windows, it puts crap all over the machine. You got the registry, you got this, that, and the other, where it puts stuff. So you really need some kind of instrumentation to help you manage that kind of stuff. When it comes down to things like Linux, though, there's no central registry where you can really screw the machine up, and you have to have all this stuff built in there. You have packages, and I think a lot of them just don't want to learn Debian, the Debian packaging way, or the Ubuntu, or the CentOS, RPM Red Hat packaging. Um, so you end up with a lot of fun stuff there that you have to do. So they try to get around that by using things like Kubernetes or Chef or this, that, or the other, where they just unpack a tarball and then have stuff just shuffle it around the system. Where we've already got things like on the no secret I'm a Debian guy, so our stuff is Debian 8 legacy that we're getting rid of. Our new stuff is Debian 10, and for that we just built Debian packages. So for us, it's and I have a I'm no the company I work for is no Amazon, but we handle a significant amount of traffic with a significant amount of servers required to do that. And so we use not Kubernetes and not Docker. We use bare metal for all of our FreeSWITCH instances because it just doesn't make any sense to run. FreeSWITCH is already multi-threaded. It's already handled large memory footprint, that kind of stuff. It doesn't, in my opinion, make sense to add another layer of virtualization between FreeSWITCH and the hardware. Right? You take all the business logic as much data storage as you can off of that, and stuff that runs there is just call routing scripts and stuff like that. They're asking external databases what to do with it. So if that box fails,
from another side, you can also use, for example, configuration management and deployment management, like Ansible, just to say something like Puppet, Alt, or whatever.
well, I mean, therein lies the thing. The OSs have a lot of this stuff built in, right? So for us, because we don't run Ansible or Docker or one of these other things, we have simple scripts that just hit a centralized database that has everybody has a hardware inventory system already, right? They have like they have something that says, okay, you've got this box, it has this MAC address, it has this IP address, right? And here's a host name for it, and here's an inventory. Everybody has those databases. We just took our database and wrote a CGI that sits in front of it. So when a machine boots up via its either pre-seed in the RPM world, in the CentOS RPM world. I mean, excuse me, pre-seed is Debian, or Kickstart, which is like CentOS world. When it asks for that file, there's a CGI that just generates it for it. So it gets all that stuff during the boot up procedure, and there's just a package, our custom package that we're going to build anyway. You got to build a software package for our stuff. We're going to build that anyway, so why not just do it all in one spot? And so now the software installs, and the machine knows what it's going to do. What happens if the hardware fails or the OS fails? Who cares? There's nothing on the machine. Fix the hardware and send it an IPMI command to reboot off of Pixie, and now it'll self reinstall, go through its validation procedure, make sure everything's good, and we stick it back in rotation. And that doesn't matter whether it's FreeSWITCH, OpenSIP, this, that, or the other. Now, I mean, we virtualized OpenSIP for some for some business reasons, not for technical reasons, um, because of what we do. Um, if you are one of our customers, you get your own OpenShips instance. You get your own
Right.
IP addresses, right? So for us, virtualizing the OpenShips means that now we've got one IP address, one public IP per one OpenShips instance, and we're not mixing traffic there. But we can also rearrange those, for business continuity purposes, because our customers are carriers. They're very sensitive to downtime. If I lose a piece of hardware, if I lose one instance, I'm only affecting one IP. I'm not affecting 10 IPs or 20 IPs that could be listing on that same piece of hardware on that one OpenShips instance. So, you get those kind of things. You can still use virtualization, but when it comes down to it, you're still building the boxes, which is the standard off-the-shelf packaging tool. You're not having to learn or add the complexity of yet another packaging on top of the one that you've already got to know anyway, or on top of these three other systems that you're using to keep track of your hardware and your rental machines and this, that, and the other. It's all consolidated there. I think it also boils down to the old argument about ticket trackers. you know, Everybody hates ticket trackers. I'm not going to mention any ticket trackers' name, and they all suck. But everybody hates them for different reasons. I don't like this one because of that reason. This one over here is bad because of this reason over here. So you kind of just pick the one to go with, and I kind of like the KISS method. And just by going with native packages, you can kind of keep it simple and go from there. But it's one of those things. Um, I'm kind of not the right person to ask about Kubernetes and that kind of stuff. You know, um, for that reason. Uh, but it is what it is. So,
How do you see the direction our industry is going? And in 5 years, more or less, all is changed. And 5 years from now,
well, I think 5 years from now, we're going to see more consolidation. We're going to continue to see consolidation, and especially in the U.S. market, we're seeing it heavily right now. But I think what we're also going to see is um, we're going to see more reliance on outsourced, uh, platform as a service type stuff for PBX. Um, but I think what we're also going to see is we're going to see further consolidation of the so-called minute vendors, because prices are collapsing on that. A decade ago, 15 years ago, wholesale rates were what, in the U.S. were like 0.8 cents per minute. Now and so wholesale, you could actually make a little bit of money on that if you were doing like a 10 to 15% margin. Now the rates are collapsed to where they're like 0.2 cents per minute or lower. And so you've got those wholesale guys are still trying to make money on that, but they're making 2/100ths of a cent at 10% margin. And to make any money on that, they got to run 10 million minutes, and then they're still only making like couple $1,000. So, so now they've got to run 100 million minutes. There's just at some point that traffic there's not going to be enough traffic to support everybody trying to do it. So they're going to have to consolidate. Um, I think people that are now getting ready for the value add, guys like Max are doing it right. They're going for the end office and for the PBX. I think that's where over the next 5 to 10 years, that's where the real money's going to be. That and unified communications. And so, uh, and being able to operate that either as in either a cloud or a on-prem type model. If you can do both, that's even better. I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see more consolidation. I don't want to say consolidation, but unification. Software-defined networking, things like uh, your switch management and your communications, your total communications inside your office space. are going to be married with your external communication. So things like VPNs, so you can access, your VoIP resources and your voicemail and all that other good stuff. It's all going to be tied together to try to give us more security, layered on top of what we've already got. But it also allows people. It'll also allow for the remote workforce, because I think with not to bring it up, but because of things like the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, it's shown, especially in the first world, where we've seen these lockdowns, that business can continue for office workers. Not just yes, the warehouse workers and people that are physically moving product have to go in. Those bodies are needed there, but the support personnel in the office, the human resources people, the purchasing people, the sales people, this has shown us that they truly can work from home, or wherever they happen to be. I'll use Kel, my other half, as an example, as an HR professional. He goes to the office 1 day a week for the last 3-4 months. To avoid the physical interaction with other people to help limit the spread of the virus. But the only reason she really goes in is to get mail, get physical mail that she has to have for doing her job. Government correspondence, bills, that kind of stuff, that she has to take care of. So she goes in and gets those, and she spends half a day to a day at the office, and then works from home the rest of the time. And she doesn't necessarily do that every week. So with that, there's network security implications. There's you've got remote workers now that are doing things like taking their laptops or their desktop computers from the office home. You've got groups that are still very much in business using hard phones on the desk. So they have SIP hard phones now at home. So pushing that out to the cloud, being able to unify that with the VPN configuration, access what resources back at the office, access to other co-workers, file and print shares, that kind of stuff. I think we'll see some more. I think we're going to see some more consolidation in that, in those market segments. So,
for example, what we expect Europe and this wave and impact credible from 5G. We expect that all the panorama will change dramatically.
Yeah.
And all communication will be centered around and services. That's important. Your production line, your internal network, and your
well, I think 5G is going to make a big difference in densely populated areas, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're in Milan or you're in Toronto or you're in Chicago or Los Angeles or a major city, you're going to see 5G really affect the way they do things there, uh, because of the density and the bandwidth that they can pull out of the 5G network. Now, when you get away from those dense population cores, say let's just use say like I live near Memphis, for example. 5G is going to work really, really well in Memphis. But once you hit the suburbs, 5G is still going to work okay, but it's going to be less effective, especially in the U.S. because of the RF spectrum that they're deploying it on. The ranges are not that great. Now, once you get out slightly outside the suburbs into I want to say the populated countryside, right? Where you still have where the population density has gone down, but you still have a relatively good number of people there. 5G is going to be really less effective there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, where I live, unless they put a tower much closer to me, 5G is going to be fairly useless for me. Unless they try to deploy 5G the higher level protocols on 5G above the physical layer, but the physical layer 5G stuff is not going to work. It just does not have the range due to the spectrum they're using. They're going to have to repurpose some 4G spectrum or some 3G spectrum to support it. The closest towers to me are something like 10 kilometers away.
Oh.
And I'm in the middle of 3 towers that are like 10 kilometers away. And even sitting in my office right now, I've got I'm on LTE. I've got 2 bars of LTE service, and that's on spectrum that reaches further than the 5G spectrum. And so when you also get into areas like Europe, for people that do live in the countryside, Giovanni, I don't know how much, how dense it is where you are, but I know you mentioned earlier you moved to the mountainside, right? When you get,
we have different.
we have different, things there, but also the same spectrum though that they're using for 5G, depending on how old your home is, right? Or you get into people like Mr. James Bodie. If you guys don't know JB, JB been around the community for a while. He's out of the UK. He lives in a very, very old historic English home in the UK, and he has Wi-Fi problems already because the walls are just that thick. Right?
Yeah. Another thing for technological process, I guess, Giovanni, the delays might be a problem. Like if you try to control some kind of industrial equipment, you probably don't want additional delay you have if you go through like the tower and back and stuff.
Since
I think 5G
the first bonus of 5G will be exactly that. So they have almost a delay.
Yeah, but it's never zero because it's physical signal. So it had to travel 10 kilometers to the tower in Ken's case, and it's you cannot beat the speed of light.
You're supposed to have your own 5G plan. And then
yeah, maybe that's, but I guess still I mean for whenever possible, I still think the wired connections will be used at least in technological process, because it's you cannot beat the reliability like of good wire.
Well, I mean, 5G, all the security in the world on 5G, LTE, Wi-Fi, etc., and is easily defeated with a $250 signal jammer. And I think some of these companies realize that, and so where you have, I'll give you an example. I live near a natural gas compressor station along a natural gas pipeline. And for that facility, because they deal with a volatile gas where they're compressing it and removing heat from it, so they can pump it to terminals, south of here. They have multiple wide area network connections that report to other locations, and they have, I want to say they have 3 or 4 different connections over there for redundancy's sake. 2 of those connections are fiber, and 2 of those connections are actually RF, but they're they're reserved, they're federally reserved spectrum microwave links on a 100-meter tall tower. So you see stuff like that, and I think you'll see some of that there. I think you might see some wireless for redundancy, but machine control where people are near it and that accidents can happen. They want hardwired buttons that they can hit. They want that e-stop button has to be hardwired to kill power. It can't be off a tower. People are gonna. I do think 5G is going to be a boon for some people in some areas where they're close enough to the tower. Give you where I live. I'm lucky to have gigabit GPON that passes in front of my house. So I've got full gigabit up and down connection. Now you go 2 blocks south of me, and actually you go to the corner, and then everything past the corner, those guys can't even get DSL. So they're stuck with currently with 4G, LTE, or satellite. And a lot of them have opted for satellite because the LTE 4G is so bad down here. There's just not enough bandwidth on that network that's been allocated to service those people because the phone company doesn't care there's not enough of them. So they go to things like Viasat, which has some geosync satellites. And geosync satellites, just the physics say RTT ping times, not including equipment delays, is 600 milliseconds. The 100 millisecond flight time from ground to orbit, and then another 150 back, and then, the 300 return trip. Now you add in equipment delays, you're talking 750, 800, maybe a full second RTT on that. Now, things like 5G are going to address that by putting the towers a lot closer. I mean, 10 kilometers is a lot better than 20,000 kilometers. Or is it 30,000 kilometers of geosync orbit? So that's
yeah. But with the projects like Starlink, they're actually going to address it. So,
I've applied for the beta group for Starlink.
Cool.
So yeah, I actually got an email from Starlink 3 or 4 days ago asking me for they originally asked for zip codes, and then I got an update email asking for a physical address the other day. So I don't know if they were asking just like everybody for physical addresses so they can figure out, or if they were saying, oh, look, this guy might be in a good area that we could test into. So I'm hoping it's the latter, but
Yeah.
I'm probably wrong. They probably ask everybody for their physical addresses, but so it would be kind of cool to end up with a Starlink term. But
yeah. Cool.
Yeah, but Starlink's a different thing too. Starlink, I think, is going to address some of the geosync satellite comm issues because they're bringing it down to what?
Much closer. It's going to be like 10,
we're talking,
I think, 20,
well, we're talking
30 milliseconds.
Yeah, we're talking, 500, 600 kilometer orbits versus a 30,000 kilometer orbit, and so that's going to be a lot better on the latency there. But the latency there is still going to be higher than what we're going to see on the ground. The problem is, I think, with and this is what I see out of American my perspective is American, right, guys? Because that's what I deal with the most. But what I see, I think they'll deploy really well in high density population areas, or what they call cream areas here in the U.S., where they can make a lot of money out of a lot of subscribers. But when they get out into the outer edges of the suburbs and just beyond that, they're going to deploy, but they're not going to deploy enough resources to really support those people because they don't make enough money out there. And then when you get out into the really rural areas where the population density drops to like a person per square mile, half a person per square kilometer, I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see it. You're going to still see things like LTE spectrum being used and 4G spectrum being used, and because they're going to require that.
But in the other on the other end, it's also going to change kind of the whole communication landscape. I mean, something like Starlink, because even with the 5G or whatever future cell technology they would deploy, it's not going to be 100% coverage. I mean, I do a lot of outdoors stuff, and it's basically pretty much you drive like 40 minutes out of the city, and you get to the area where there is no coverage, and probably never will be, because there's no, as you said, there is no population there to support it. But then with something Starlink, it's pretty much automatic, right? It's everywhere. So I mean, I would totally see something like Starlink 2 or 3 to be integrated into like gen of cell phone, like 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
That would totally make it universal. Like you will have pretty much 100% coverage, unless you go underground or something like that.
Yeah,
And with the autonomous vehicles of all sorts, I think it's very important.
I'm looking forward to stuff like Starlink, and there's some other people that are talking about building competing constellations, because I think that's going to open up a lot of possibilities for. I don't want to say IoT because I'm not a huge fan of the IoT model where they where everything has to rely on the central server. I think we don't do it. I don't think with IoT they do enough to push stuff out so you can operate it on your own without having to be dependent on the company selling you that device. But I think you're going to see a lot of possibilities open up there now for things out in the rural areas to have better communication. Means we can spread people out a little bit more and don't have to be so dense in the city cores.
Yeah, that might be.
But we can also, be able to work out in the middle of nowhere and not have to worry about am I near my fiber connection? Am I near enough a tower to have enough bandwidth because I need to upload some video or I need to do a video conference call with Max and Giovanni on Saturday, and so do I have to be at home on my GPON connection, or can I be, which is too hot to be out at the lake today, but can I be down at the on the ski slope, and I'll just take a break from skiing, and we'll sit out here and have a conversation with these guys, and then once it's done, I'll go back to skiing. That kind of thing I think would be really, really cool. And I think we'll see more of that type of thing. I think it'll be real interesting to see uh, what we're going to see in the ways of mobile computing, laptops, iPad, tablets, that kind of thing. With 5G, what kind of integrations are we going to see there so that people can have their more powerful computing devices on the go? I think Wi-Fi still. I don't think Wi-Fi is going anywhere. MIMO and band steering and that kind of stuff are coming along quite nicely. So, and we're seeing more and more products deployed with that. So that's going to be there. It's going to be good with fiber. Even companies like Ubiquity Networks they're dropping 100 gig fiber products on the market now. And this is prosumer and small business stuff. So they can go out and that Ubiquity's got a switch that's coming out. It's going to be in the $2,000 to $3,000 price range that has 800 gig ports on it. 100 gig network ports that it's affordable for small and medium business to buy. And you're starting to see that kind of bandwidth requirements with the videos that we're producing now with virtualization and the storage requirements on the NAS and that kind of stuff. You're seeing those kind of requirements, so it's really becoming available. And if that's becoming available on that level, it's only a matter of time before it's available, out onto the consumer level. My new desktop came with a 10 gig copper Ethernet port on it. I didn't even realize it was on there. And then I opened the box up and it's like, what? There's 4 Ethernet ports on the back of this thing. That one's a different color. What is that? And I look at the manual. Oh, it's NBase T. So it can do 10 gig, 5 gig, 2.5 gig, or a gig, all on one port. And you're starting to see the switches for that start coming into the consumer market now. So that's going to change what we can do because of the amount of bandwidth that we have available. And I mean, so it's going to be real interesting to see how that works out. Of course, all of us have Cat 5 deployed everywhere, so that means with NBase T, that means we've got to rip out all the Cat 5 and put Cat 6 or Cat 7 or Cat 27, whatever the new one is, in our offices. So, but I mean, there's going to be a lot of really cool stuff coming down the pipe there, and 4K video is not going anywhere. There's already talk of 8K and 16K video.
And I have a last question.
So
And it's like we have now like Asterisk, FreeSWITCH. They're pretty, let's say, feature complete. And then we have proxies, media proxies that are also reliable, complete. How you see open source telecom software to proceed future? What you think we can write, can do?
Well, things like proxies, like OpenSIP and that kind of stuff, they're fairly feature complete. I will agree with that. Things like Asterisk and FreeSWITCH, I don't think those will ever be truly feature complete. I think they'll be fairly feature complete, right? But let's look at it right now. We have a big push for shaken and stir extensions to be deployed in the U.S. market, and you guys are probably doing the same thing over in Europe. With shaken and stir, there's no support really in Asterisk or FreeSWITCH for those things yet. There's patches for FreeSWITCH in the works. There's some shaken and stir support stuff in the works. I know Tony and team have been working on that for a minute. I'm not sure where they are on it because I haven't talked to them about it lately, but I know they're working on it. I know I've submitted a patch for the identity header that's being evaluated for inclusion right now in FreeSWITCH that allows you to pass shaken and stir information through, or allows you to pass it in, mangle it in the dial plan with that external app, and then pass it back out. So I think we'll keep seeing stuff like that pop up because with SIP and with any other VoIP protocol, every time we turn around, they try to extend it more to address this other, use case that they want to do. So I think we'll continue to see some of that for the time being. But I think really what I would really love to see is kind of a feature complete product that is a cross. It's a cross between something like that's open source, but is a cross between something like SignalWire, Plivo, Twilio type API, and something like Fusion PBX. So now you have a wrapper for Switch. Maybe the back end wrapper, maybe the back end application is a plugin, so it can be FreeSWITCH Asterisk, OpenSIPs, Elio. Insert your favorite open source VoIP platform here, right? And then the front end is a plugin also, so or it has support plugins, but in the middle it's just RESTful or JSON, so that you can extend it and you can integrate it with other things, but you can also use that same type of control back down to the your telephony engine. So I think something like that would be really cool to see because I think you could get some kind of workable prototype out in relative short order, but it's going to be a big project to do. But I think if somebody were to do that, that would be a really cool project, and it would be breathe some life back in to open source telephony. Because it's very much mature. And so the only real updates that you got to do to it is for newer technologies or for feature requests.
Yeah. And, do you guys subscribe, by the way, to the SIP core mailing list?
To the what?
ATF SIP core mailing list, where they propose the new extensions and stuff.
No, I'm not on that mailing list. It makes my eyes glaze.
Okay. No, but seriously, it's pretty. I was about the same kind of insane business scan. But I did subscribe last year after talking to Ole Johansson on the JanusCon. And there are some interesting work going on, like change from MD5 to better digest algorithm is definitely long overdue. There was also recently a new proposal to add a new class of provisional response codes to handle call rating. So you can basically say if the call might be like spam or something before you start ringing or alerting. So there's definitely some stuff going on, and if you guys interested in that part of SIP, definitely recommend subscribing. It's not too bad with the chatter.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool mailing lists out there for the IETF. So I would recommend checking them out, at least just to check them out. Well, that's where you find out what people are talking about doing, and what's going to be coming down the pipe. Because if they're talking about it there, they've already decided that if somebody is talking about it there, their company has decided that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, but you can still a little bit bend it, or at least try to steer it the right direction. Or if you see some weird kink in what they're proposing, you can. Usually, people there are pretty open to like changing stuff up.
Right.
Because then if nobody speaks up, it basically gets adopted, and now we get some weird RFC on us on our heads. Anyway.
Yeah. No. But yeah. So, guys, I'm running short on time today. Is there any questions you guys might have? Any other questions you guys might have? Or I see, we've got one guy has been watching for a bit there on YouTube and has asked a few questions or made a few comments, and dead on. So if anybody else has any questions, feel free to ask away. I've been around FreeSWITCH forever and a day, and around Asterisk for almost forever and a day. Guys, feel free to ask. Yeah, and yeah, he's right on that 600 milliseconds on C-band. If it's KU or KA, that can depend on atmospheric a little bit, but the speed of light is the speed of light. The speed of light says 150 milliseconds. That's what I was basing that on. So
yeah, it's kind of you cannot beat it.
don't even. And we're not even talking there about things like switching delays and the transponders on the satellite. We get back down on the ground, switching delays on, the Ethernet level and whatever packet network technology they're using there. And, the gods forbid they're using something like MPLS over a shared network, between the ground station and the data center where they're doing all kinds of other fun stuff, because they'll run into, class of service and committed information rate problems there, and retransmits and this, that, and the other. No fun.
It's a lot of fun.
I've had satellite. I've had VSAT internet. I know how horrible it is.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess we don't have any questions more on the channel. But I just something I wanted to share with you guys. Some little projects that kind of came up. No, not really a project. Some cool observation. I've been just playing with AWS deployments, and I think Giovanni Giovanni really hates those guys, like people scanning internets on see if they can find some open SIP ports.
Yeah, no, I really.
With the scanners? Oh, the scanners.
For
Oh,
scanning. script
Sorry about that, guys.
kiddies.
Yeah,
All those
script kiddies. But I think it's they're not that bad. I mean, you can definitely use it to test your prototypes. It basically
yes,
gives you pretty much free source of test traffic.
Yeah.
I can just share my screen, just setting it up.
I
Uh,
actually you'll laugh. I actually have a script that I did that runs on a host on my network. That any traffic that hits that host inserts that IP address into my BGP black hole table, and then I send that to my ISP, and any traffic from that IP address or any IP addresses that are on that list don't even come to my network from my ISP. It gets dropped on that side, and
that's
then
cool.
and but you can only do that if you're doing BGP. But it does it for my entire network, and there's probably about 300 IP addresses in there at any given time because it only holds them around for a week and then it drops them out. But it's pretty funny. You can if you get an IP that's never had SIP on it before, it still only takes the scanners about an hour to find it.
yeah, it's pretty quick, and then you pretty much destined to have it. You cannot undo it. But really, it's quite useful. I think might be useful for software testing because it pretty much just gives you like
Well,
constant traffic.
I think throwing one of your boxes out there with a configuration on it, and then routing the traffic to something that's not going to let it pass, but will let you know if it got through your proxy config or not when it's not supposed to. I think that's kind of useful.
We just routed it to the static IVR of some sort, and it basically keeps collecting calls.
Oh, would be nice also to try to contact. We spoke about Marco Gauci, Sivicius.
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
he's
yeah,
nice guy.
yeah. I mean, the tool that he wrote is really cool, and I loved how he responded to some bugs that are in there. There's a bug in SIP Vicious that he won't tell you what it is, or he might tell you what it is now, but he refuses to fix it. If you send the right custom crafted SIP packet back
Yeah, you
to us,
kill it. Yeah,
you kill it. It's a bug
yeah.
in there.
The
Oh
packet was
really?
bad.
Oh, yeah. There's a bug in there, in the somewhere in there. But if you and he knows about this and he refuses to fix it, and he tells people about how to trigger it, right? But if you send the
Oh
right
yeah.
packet back when SIP Vicious is nailing you, it'll kill the SIP Vicious instance and it won't restart.
Oh yeah.
And it's not a nice shutdown on the SIP Vicious instance that's hitting you. It is a hard seg fault. And when I heard that he left that bug in there so that people were being targeted would get killed, it's like, okay, this dude's cool. But yeah,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
this the
Go
number
ahead.
of calls you've had in the last 24 hours or the last hour or so?
Yeah, that's 400 calls. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's pretty fun. It kind of again, it really goes through all the weird stuff that could be your software could be subject in like all those like different uh,
yeah.
different stuff in garbage everywhere. Anywho, just yeah, but realistically, I was kind of pretty the same opinion about running on virtual virtual boxes not so long ago, but then we started kind of really deploying it, and seems to have at least some economical value. So like on the instance that costs like, I don't know, $20 a month, you can have like a full blown telephony system, and it's pretty useful for like somebody who has only 50 channels stop.
Hi guys, I gotta go
Oh yeah.
just,
Yeah,
right
gotta
now
keep up there.
because it's 8 p.m. here.
Well,
All right.
Giovanni,
Well, Ken, very nice for stopping by, and we definitely would love to have you more often.
oh yeah, I
If
like
you don't mind that, I will.
No, I don't mind. It's great talking to you, Max, Giovanni. You guys, let me know. Make sure if you got me on if you got a mailing list, make sure you add me to it so I get the alerts.
Oh
On
yeah, okay.
and
Maybe that's something we need to set up. Maybe
you know what? I'm gonna do it anyway. You guys watching on YouTube, real quick. Look right down over here. I think is where it is. There's a subscribe button. Click it for Max and Giovanni. And right next to that subscribe button, bell icon. Right, click that little bell icon, and it'll alert you when these guys are back on again with another guest and everything.
You're the American one. You know things.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know how to do this.
Hey, guys, you guys know. Well, you guys know, and Giovanni, you were on with me a lot of times and everything. I used to do this. I used to do a podcast like this with guys from the community, other projects, that kind of stuff, called ClueCon Weekly, in relation to the ClueCon conference and the FreeSWITCH project. And these guys work hard. These guys are going to work hard, a lot harder than they probably realize right now, to keep guests coming in every week. So you guys help them out. And I'm going to say, and Max, Giovanni, sorry if I'm stepping out of line here, but if you guys watching on YouTube want to see somebody else other than my ugly mug on here talking with these guys, let Max and Giovanni know who it is. Let them know who in the community you want to see on here them talking to. Email them. Tell them in the comments.
Yeah, there is an email up there. Email up there.
That way they know who to go bug, and because I've known Giovanni for a long time. And he will bust his butt to get people in here, and I know Max will too. So you guys help him out, and I want to see them be successful with this, because this is really cool what they're doing here, and I appreciate the opportunity to come in and hang out with you guys, Max, Giovanni. So good luck to you in the future, and let me know who's coming next time around.
We will. We'll keep you in the loop. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Giovanni. Yeah, another good Saturday. Thanks, everyone watching. Appreciate it.
Later, Max.